Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Today's guest will be Seabass of WNWS in Jackson, Tennessee. This show presented by the Well Coffee House, which turns coffee into water. The Well is a coffee house with a mission to bring clean water to the world. To date, over 30 communities across the globe have access to safe water, health, and hope. You can make an impact by visiting a Well Coffee House location today. You can find those in Brentwood, Green Hills, downtown, and Bellevue. More information can be found at wellcoffeehouse.org. The Well Coffee House, where coffee changes lives. We thank our co-sponsor, WellSpire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center, which is located in the Gulch. Today's news, sponsored by Sutherland & Belk, a local injury law firm committed to helping those who've been injured in accidents. If you or someone you know has been in a wreck or other accident, reach out to Sutherland & Belk, see what your rights are. You can find their contact info online at sbinjurylaw.com. Well, the Vanderbilt men's basketball schedule has been released. I will not read it all here. I'll just say you can go to viewcommodores.com and start making your plans for the upcoming season. Both the non-conference and the conference portions have now been released. Today's guest line, presented by Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I've slept on their sheets for years. They were amazing. Had no clue how comfortable they could be until I got them. They are fair trade certified. That means they're made under safe conditions by men and women treated and paid fairly. Boll & Branch sheets come with a 1-month guarantee, so if you don't like them, you can send them back. But trust me, you're not going to want to. Once you get the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted best mattress of 2018. You can go to Boll & Branch right now, enter the promo code Vandy, get $50 off your first set of sheets. Willie Donick is our guest now. Of course, our audience knows him as a former Vanderbilt basketball and baseball player. A lot of people also know him as the play-by-play voice of the Predators and the host of Darren, Donick, and Chase. Willie, thanks for joining us today. I know you had a busy weekend. I hope you were doing well.
It was a great weekend. All kinds of stuff going on. The Predators have their prospect showcase going on with their rookies and real young players. And then the real training camp will start later this week. So you're adding hockey on top of a full football weekend. So I was happy as can be. You know, there was never a dull moment this weekend. It was exciting.
What is the start date for the Predators' regular season?
October 3rd is opening night, and the first 4 games are at home. So a chance to maybe get off to a good start. We'll see. It's a long road either way, but I know there's a lot of excitement building up.
Indeed. Well, maybe a little bit more excitement around Vanderbilt basketball after this weekend with the Miles Stewart commitment. I know that you've not gotten a chance to see him play, but it sounds like he's a fit for them. The things that he said coming out of the visit were positive. He can shoot it a little bit, and he's the number 136 player in the class, and was thinking about this. That's kind of the area where they've made their living over the past 20 or 30 years is they get the occasional top 50 player, and when they get a top 50 player, it's usually somebody in the 40s with the Garland and Chateau commitments and signees accepted. But that's generally an area where they've kind of made their living for Vanderbilt is usually in that maybe 80 to 90 to 150 range, and Miles Stewart is right in the middle of that.
Yeah, and I've never been one, Chris, that pays too much attention or worries too much about whether you're 136, 56, or 256, because I think what's more important is, and this may take a little time for Jerry Stackhouse, a first-year college coach, to identify the types of players that he needs to be successful in this job. And I think we talked about this some last week. I mean, I think you can look at some Vanderbilt teams that were very good in the past that maybe didn't have, or maybe had one guy, or 2 guys that were from the top 100 in recruits. But I think you can win a lot of different ways. You do need a couple of guys you can build around. There's no secret to that. So I'm not downplaying the importance of recruiting, but it's really a big picture thing. And I would say on a local level, what Rick Byrd did for years and years to understand what worked for him and what would win for him was one of his best secrets, I would say, or best skills. And I think every coach has got to do that in his own mind. If you're strictly going for the top ranked guys you can get, and not really be conscious of how they fit into what you want to do, then I think you can set yourself up for trouble. But this is something we're going to have to wait and see how Jerry Stackhouse is able to put the pieces together.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And you look at some of the teams outside of the Kentuckys and the Kansases, look in your backyard. I mean, over in Knoxville, or not your backyard, but of course everybody knows that story. Rick Barnes got a bunch of kids who were the best ones were barely inside the top 150, and you look what he did with that the last 2 years. You look at Kermit Davis at Ole Miss. He pieced it together with a lot of players that were not top 50 or top 150 recruits. Last year, Ole Miss had a nice season. And you look at Vanderbilt historically. It's not a program that traditionally brings in top 25 rated recruiting classes, but you look at the teams that have succeeded. They had shooters, and I think more than anything, they had cohesiveness. You know a lot about that from the teams that you played on. Those teams were not teams where you saw Vanderbilt just dotting the top 150 and 200 prospects list with players, but they fit together, they played together, they were cohesive, and I think that's the key is find kids who can play at that level, find kids that fit your system, and make sure it's a cohesive unit. So, who knows how this will turn out, but again, that is kind of where they've made their living over the years is finding kids who fit and are good enough.
Right. Well, and I think you hit on one element, especially in this day and age. You've got to be able to shoot. The way that the 3-point line is being utilized in today's game, if you are lacking shooters, you're going to have trouble scoring unless you are off the charts, defense, rebounding, that sort of thing. And traditionally, it's been easier for Vanderbilt to find the good shooters than it has been constructing their team another way. You need a blend of both, of course, but the shooters are important. And just to sort of give you, again, an example of the inexact science, we'll go old school. I'm getting older now, so the guys I referenced and played with are getting more old school. We'll call it the Shaq era, early 90s when I played. My freshman roommate was a guy named Kevin Anglin, who I don't think would have shown up on any top 100 or 200 or maybe even 300. I don't know. He played at Franklin High School right down the road, won a state championship. But it's not like people were beating down his door. And, truth be told, he and I both had to wait for a couple other guys to sign at other SEC schools before we got scholarships offers. And Kevin Anglin was not a guy that was going to wow you with any one skill, but he was one heck of a winning player. And we won a lot of games because of some of the little things that he did. It just shows you, people develop at a different rate. People kind of surprise you, and but again, he was the right fit for what we were trying to do. So there's a lot of different things that go into building a winning team. You made a great reference with Rick Barnes. I think it just shows you don't have to have certain guys, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. It's not everything, even though certainly you love to have a couple of guys that have that special ability.
A lot of things went wrong with the Bryce Drew era, but one of the things that was starting to bother me a little bit before the wheels totally came off in the way that they recruited is, and you'd watch the players come in and they just a lot of times lack shooters. Now they would shoot the ball a lot in practice and shoot it from distance, but you were watching and the skill sets, they were these athletes and kind of these, in hindsight, misfit parts. And look, the one thing that you've got to have at Vanderbilt, I think, to win is shooters. You go back and look at the worst part of Kevin Stallings' career, other than the first couple of years, and even those years, they didn't have great shooters. I guess they had Brendan Plavic, and he transferred out. But you look at the run after Taylor and those guys left, and when Rod Odom was their best shooter, and they had a backcourt of a couple kids that weren't good outside shooters, and, of course, they couldn't shoot a year ago. They'd go – I think they started one game like 0 for 18 or 0 for 19 from three-point range. That was one of the things that was kind of getting on my radar is like, he's not bringing in a lot of shooters. And again, there was a lot of reasons last year went wrong, but I think that I don't know that you can really win at Vanderbilt unless you've got a couple of guys that can really fill it up from the outside.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of things that go into that. If when you're recruiting somebody, if all he can do is shoot, then that player is going to be in a tough spot. If he can't guard anybody and you have to change your defense You feel like, hey, this is a tough matchup here. I have to play zone when this guy's in the game. That's something you have to consider. And then the other part is, some guys are really good shooters in high school and on the summer league circuit and things like that. And then it doesn't quite translate at the next level when the speed of the game and the size of the players are different, making that jump. Not everybody makes that jump. And I probably put myself in that category. I played in the first few years of the three-point line in high school. And I can tell you it was a heck of a lot easier to get your shot off and have time to get your shot off on the high school level shooting threes than it was at the college level. So there's a lot that goes into it. But I agree with you in a general sense. You've got to have guys who can shoot the ball, especially with each passing year. Just the way the math of the game is working and the way the analytics is working, you've got to be able to get a certain percentage of your points from the three-point line, or you're going to be in trouble.
You brought up Kevin Anglin. My question to you is, would Kevin Anglin work at Vanderbilt in the SEC today? My guess is that he would, because he had the shooting skill, and though he was not the most athletic guy, he was very smart, didn't make a lot of mistakes, probably understood his defensive assignments really well. But that's the kind of kid that they've really just totally gone away from in recent years. And I'm just curious, how would that pan out if Kevin Anglin were 30 years younger and entering the SEC today?
It's a great question. And I think the answer is pretty easy. Kevin Anglin, I think, could go on any team and help them win. The versatility, the understanding of the game, the little things, the toughness, the compete level, the setting the example in the locker room. You do all those things, it rubs off. And I do think that kind of player is overlooked, not just Vanderbilt, but probably in a lot of different places. But I think those are, when you have what I call winning players who do all the little things, it does make a difference. And that's something you got to be able to measure too when you're looking and evaluating talent. It's not just, what does the guy's shot look like, and what kind of rebounder is he? What kind of body type is he? Is he going to get bigger and stronger? But how well does he understand the game? So, but it's a tricky thing, right? Because there were hundreds of schools that never gave Kevin Anglin a look. I think if he had not gone to Vanderbilt, he was going to go to Evansville, was probably the next thing, just to give you an example. Like, it's not like 3 or 4 other SEC schools were looking at him.
I'm thinking through this now and thinking of the teams that went to Sweet 16s and had some of the better years. And I think, and feel free to tell me if I'm wrong, but I think the two things that all those teams had in common that I think of the most were A, shooting, and we've been over that, and B, I think the other thing was mental toughness. I think that those have been the two common denominators in all the really good Vanderbilt teams since you and I have followed Vanderbilt. Is there something else in there that I'm missing, or would you say those are the two overriding characteristics that led to their success?
It's a really good question. So let's just take what we would say are the best Vanderbilt teams of the last, let's say, 30 years. Let's stretch it back to Will Perdue in the late 80s. And then the Kevin Anglin, Bruce Elder captain team with Billy McCaffrey, the 93 league champions that went to the Sweet 16. Okay, Will Perdue in, 87? Sweet 16? Or 88? I guess it would have been 88.
Yeah, it was 88.
Sweet 16. And then the Shane Foster, Derek Byers, 2007, Matt Frege, 2004, I think that would be.
Yep.
So what are the common denominators there? Each of them had at least one standout player, a guy that, let's forget about where they were recruited, right? Because they all came from different places. Billy McCaffrey was a transfer from Duke, big-time recruit, but transferred from Duke, where he won a national championship. Will Perdue, SEC Player of the Year type of player. Same with Matt Frege, same with Shane Foster, Derek Byers. And then you fast forward to 2011, 2012, that area, SEC champions, John Jenkins, Jeff Taylor, Festus Ezeli. I mean, that team had a lot of talent. That team probably had the most depth of next-level talent of any of them, right? But I think the rest of them, the common denominator was toughness, tremendous complementary players around at least one standout player. I think that's, and all of them, I think you had the toughness the basketball IQ, and all of them, I think we would agree, were really, really good shooting teams, right? So
Yes.
our theme today is shooting. Look at the shooters that all those teams had, right? You go back to the bomb squad, the early days of the three-point line, Barry Goheen, Barry Booker, Scott Drought, all those guys, Derek Wilcox, they could shoot the three. 93 team, you won't, I mean, it's incredible, the three-point percentages that team put, or just the overall field goal percentage. We know John Jenkins and Shane Foster and those kind of guys, they could shoot the ball. So, you know, shooting gets it done for sure, but they had plenty of other things to go on besides that.
Yeah, the other thing, intelligence would be right there with toughness. Those teams were so smart. I still remember the backdoor play with the Corey Smith layup that was the key play in beating NC State. And
sure.
You mentioned shooting, but, you know, Derek Mason has his RTI. I think this could be STI. And S could either stand for stars or could stand for shooting, and then you have toughness and intelligence. But, you know, speaking of the S part, the other thing that occurred to me, I think this is the case. I believe those 3 Sweet 16 teams we've talked about, and I guess there was one more in there too, but you had, I think Will Purdue was SEC Player of the Year in '88.
I think so, yeah.
And then you had Friggy was SEC Player of the Year that Kevin took them to the Sweet 16. You had Derek Byers was SEC Player of the Year, that Sweet 16 team. And then, of course, the one in the middle was Billy McCaffrey. So I guess you had Player of the Year. So that S could be either shooting or stars. But either way, I think those were like the 4 ingredients that you need.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting thing to put together, you know, roster construction. What makes a successful team at Vanderbilt? But all of them, you know, all these things I think are dead on. Shooting, you had the 1-star player, you had the great complementary players around them. You had toughness, I think. And I think the other thing is attention to detail. And that's something that the team last year, when they collapsed, was really lacking. The attention to detail, you know, understanding the game, understanding what are the little things that have to get done that make a difference in whether you win a game or lose a game, or a game that gets away from you as opposed to a game that maybe you have a chance to win late. All those things add up over the course of the year. And I'm really curious to see how Jerry Stackhouse comes in and tries to rebuild, you know, and reshape and build the foundation here, because he's going to have to make inroads in that area if this team's going to be competitive. And you're not only talking about this year, but setting the tone for the next teams that hopefully will have more talent.
Yeah, I think the key, Willie, is Aaron Nesmith. That's their future star potentially. And to me, it's, can you keep him around for one more year? Because I think starting 2 seasons from now with the transfers of DJ Harvey and some of those guys, maybe at that point you have enough pieces. But I don't know if you have the star that you need to build around unless he's still there. Well,
yeah, and you know, I think he is a guy that can be one of those standout players, and I think he's got the work ethic. I thought he was a guy that shined to me, even in the midst of the storm last year. I thought he really works hard. He's got good range, and I'll say this: you know, when we talk about shooters, it's a lot tougher, I think, to be a great shooter today. You've got to be able to step a step or two behind the line now, because teams are so good at defending the three. You know, we see how many times in the NCAA tournament last year there were guys, you know, was it a foul on the three-point shooter? Was it not? Well, that's because the guy, you got to be able to hit a contested one with the shot clock running down, or you might have to take one from 20, 24, 25 feet to get it off. And the best shooters can still make those, which is why the guy's still contesting when a guy's a step or two behind the line. It used to be like, if you wanted to shoot from way back there and you made it, then I'd have to tip my hat. But now it's like, I know that guy is going to make 5 or 6 out of 10 if I don't get a hand in his face. So Aaron Nesmith is that kind of guy. He can step behind the line, you know, and he can keep you honest and drive to the basket. So he's got some really good tools for sure. It's just going to be a matter of, can he be put in good situations to succeed? Can they get the complementary players around him and all those other things. But, a coach really, all he can do is try to create a great environment. It's out of his control whether a guy feels like he's ready to go pro or not. I don't know if that's going to be the case with Neesmith. I'll believe it when I see it. I'm always a believer in taking the extra year unless you absolutely know you're going to be in there in the first round. There's so many guys that sort of we forget that maybe tried to go pro and either didn't get drafted at all, start in Europe, or play in the G League for a while. That's a tough life, man. I'd rather be in the SEC than playing in the G League for at least one more year, right? The G League's always going to be there. So we'll see. There's a lot of different ways it can go. I think the important thing for Jerry Stackhouse is going to be set the tone, create an environment that people want to be around, right? Whether that means you win 10 games, 15 games, whatever it is this year, you're setting the tone. You're creating your culture.
Yeah, and I think Aaron Neesmith is the type of kid that if it's borderline, he's going to stay because education is something that is very important to him.
Yeah, I hope that's true. And that's this is another thing we've talked about, Chris. When we've talked basketball and where it's going from here, that's another very important thing. And I think you can look at it in all those successful teams we were referencing, 88, 93, 2004, 2007, 2012. All of the guys, they enjoyed being at Vanderbilt. They valued being at Vanderbilt. They wanted to be, they valued the degree that you're working towards at Vanderbilt. If you don't have that, then you're going to have a lot more guys leave, really, to be honest with you. So you got to find guys, identify guys, which is why it's tough, right? It's tougher to do at Vanderbilt than it is at some places because you got to have guys like that. They have to value going to school.
One more thing before we go to football. I was thinking about some things you said and about the three-point line not being guarded. It's almost like CM Newton had a Moneyball kind of thing going that passed over to Eddie Fogler that Vanderbilt had, I don't know if they figured something out or they just happened to have shooters on hand and it was the perfect time to have that. But it seems like they valued the three-point bucket more than everybody else at the time. And that was really the thing because you look at CM's teams before the three-point line, they weren't good. And once that came in, that's when things really changed for Vanderbilt basketball for a period of really close to a decade.
Yeah, I thought the SEC did a really good job. The SEC storied on CM Newton. So he had the perfect combination. He had shooters. He had the foresight to know, because he had studied the international game, how important that three-point line was going to be. And he had Will Perdue. So you had the perfect blend of, okay, you want to double team Will Perdue? I'm going to have four guys on the court at all times that can hurt you. You're going to double off of him. I'm going to have somebody who's going to shoot an open three. I think that was brilliant. I don't think all the coaches grasped how the math worked, to be honest with you. Rick Pitino certainly did, and he came into the league at the same time Eddie Fogler did, which has happened to be right when I came into the league. And it was really amazing to watch how extreme his teams were, right? And how they put those three balls up there like you wouldn't believe. But, there was a balance you had to do. But I think over time, most people have grasped it, but they've also gotten better at how to defend it, right? They defended a lot differently than they did back at the start. But those teams that were often in valuing it from the start, they benefited a lot.
Willie, let's talk football for a minute. Your impressions of the Purdue game.
Well, I thought it was a little disappointing that they couldn't stay a little bit closer and really have a chance to win the game late. I thought they flashed in a lot of ways on offense and defense. I mean, obviously the penalties were killer. It was very frustrating to watch. I thought the key plays in the game, that's where you have to tip your hat to Purdue. For example, when it was disappointing sometimes when they were going to go to Moore. They wanted to throw the ball to Moore or Hopkins. And I admired Purdue's ability to get the ball to those guys the way they did. There were times where Vanderbilt was there. Sometimes they had two guys there, but Moore still came up with the ball. You see, you know what I'm saying? Like in the red zone would be another example. Purdue cashed in so many times when they got the ball down there. If Vanderbilt could have, you knew Purdue was going to get some yards, but they weren't able to get turnovers for the most part, and they weren't able to get stops in the red zone. But that being said, I thought, you saw why. I mean, Riley Neal didn't play a great game, but he flashed. You can see why he won the job. That he threw some really pretty balls. Now it's a matter of, making the key plays at the key times, and now it's a matter of just a little bit more consistency, a little more cohesion, trying to get the three big weapons involved. That's what you have to look at Purdue, Chris, is Moore and Hopkins, right? The way they're able to find ways to get those guys the ball and do it in the rhythm of the offense. If Vanderbilt can take a step forward or two in that area, that's what you want to be looking for. Now, it's been made tough with the offensive line and stuff like that, but I don't know how you felt about it. I was disappointed they weren't closer, but at least I saw some things, some individual plays where I said, okay, I see some talent here. It's just a matter of putting it all together and being more consistent.
There are a couple things to me that are really puzzling right now. One's on the defensive side. I'll get to that in a minute. But watching Purdue get the ball time and time again to Moore and watching Hopkins make a couple big plays, I'm looking at that and going, okay, Vanderbilt's Rondale Moore equivalent, I think, is Keyshawn Vaughn. It's just in a different way, but I think he's their superstar. And Vanderbilt's got a tight end every bit as good as Hopkins in Pinckney, and then it's got a star receiver in Lipscomb, and I'm just watching that going, and I guess some of the obvious answer, you'd say, well, offensive line or new quarterback. Well, Purdue's had offensive line issues. Purdue also has a new quarterback who, by the way, struggled last week with turnovers. So I'm going, if Purdue can get the ball to its guys and let them dictate the flow of the game, and Vanderbilt's got one more guy than Purdue has in that regard, why does this work for Purdue and not for Vanderbilt?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that is going to be the key to the season. Now, you've got Jeff Brom, who that's his specialty, right? When he came to Purdue, that's what he brought to the table, is a really good offensive mind. And I think he won the chess match. I think Purdue is going to be a pretty solid team in the Big Ten, probably not spectacular, but would you agree, Chris, that for Vanderbilt to get back to a bowl game, especially having now lost this game, they've got to beat teams who are the equivalent of Purdue, right? The same level of team of Purdue. You're going to have to beat a couple of those teams to do the math, to get the 6-7 wins. So they've got to up their game. Now, it's a road game. Wasn't easy. But, yeah, I think you're right. How can they got to find that groove, how the pieces fit, the three really good players that they have on offense, and the complementary players. I mean, heck, Pierce flashing. Cam Johnson gets a nice little catch. They've got other guys that can make plays, but they got to put all the pieces together. And Riley Neal has got to be the guy that is the guy that brings it all together.
Yeah, I think you said it well. I think when you're Vanderbilt, that's the kind of game that you've got to make your living on. You're not going to beat Georgia. You're not going to beat LSU. But that game stings more. I did not expect them to win that coming into the season, Willie, but I also expected Purdue to be better, at least coming into week 2. And maybe the Nevada game was just a fluke, but boy, Oregon beating Nevada by 71 points didn't make you feel any better about things. But yeah, now look, everything's not lost. There's plenty more opportunities. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Tennessee if that ship, so to speak, sinks all the way. And if games like Kentucky and South Carolina, if they've lost their quarterbacks, how does that go for them? I'm not really optimistic about Missouri coming up in mid-October. UNLV should be maybe not a layup game for them, but a sure win. Northern Illinois may be a little tougher. Ole Miss got better. There's a lot of those in-between games right now where you could see that swinging either way. That's really, to be honest, that's most of their schedule from here on out is a lot of games that you could see going either way.
No question about it. I think that is really where it comes down to. And really, if you look over the years, it's what it's always come down to. It's not, you don't have to beat Georgia or LSU or the top 2 or 3 teams. You're going to have 2 or 3 of those games in this league every year that are going to be really, really difficult games where it's going to take your absolute best. And to be honest, the other team is going to have a rough day, a faltering day for you to have a chance to win. That might be the case against LSU if they keep playing well. If LSU comes in and they're ready to play and they're sharp, It's going to be tough for Vanderbilt. That's not to say at all that you don't go in there thinking you can win. But honestly, you got this bye week to keep trying to grind it out, get better. You've got the LSU game that is completely nothing to lose, right? The season's not riding on whether you win that game or not. The season is riding on what happens after that. And as you said, Chris, there's really not a game on the schedule that is completely unwinnable. We'll see if Florida emerges and gets better. That'll be tough to go down there and win for sure. But as you mentioned, Missouri, Kentucky, South Carolina, Tennessee, Ole Miss, all of those games are the kind of games you could lose all of them if you don't have your act together. That's life in this league. But if you can maximize your talent, if you can do the right thing, you're going to have a chance in all those games if you earn it. You're not going to be overmatched.
The other thing, and I'll probably get into this later in the week on the podcast, but Vanderbilt, a lot of years, has just had so many good defenses. You had them under Woody Woodenhofer. You had some good ones under Bobby Johnson. The fact that Vanderbilt is in year 6 under Derek Mason with a quote-unquote defensive guru and a former NFL defensive coordinator, and they just look horrible on defense right now. That's the other thing that I think is just leaving people scratching their heads.
Well, I thought there were some key plays where let's take 2 big plays that Moore makes, because that's part of big college football is limiting the explosive play, right? If you can win in college football if you give up a lot of yards, but you really lock down once the team gets around the 30, 35-yard line and make teams kick 45-yard field goals, which a lot of college kickers are not money on that. And Vanderbilt obviously didn't do that, right? They gave up yards, and Purdue cashed in pretty much every time they needed to in the red zone, with a couple of exceptions. But also there was a couple of big plays. There was a big third down where Moore is crossing the field. There are 2 guys bracketing him. That's exactly the defense you want to be in. He makes a tough catch in tight quarters. He cruises right in front of the official, turns the corner, and he goes all the way down. I don't know if he scored or went inside the 5. It was a huge play. Another one right down the sideline to him where it's pretty good coverage. The guy's right there. He can make a play on the ball, and Moore, being the player he is, he wins the fight for the ball, and he goes down again, either scores or gets inside the 5. Those are the types of plays where I think you're in the right defense. You got a guy right there. Those plays just need to be broken up. You got to find a way to make the play there instead of giving up the giant play that swings the field and keeps the momentum going on Purdue's side. That's where the area of improvement. It's not a big difference, right? I think the material's there. You have to keep improving from now until the end of the season. That's the benefit, I think, of having these really tough games early, is it gives you time to improve your team. And maybe by the end of the year, when you're playing teams that you match up with better, you see the benefits of that.
I'm going to go into the mailbag, which is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan and independent insurance agent Josh Minton of Brentwood. Are you in the market for auto, motorcycle, home, renters, or landlord insurance? What about life or commercial insurance? Call Josh at 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Facebook at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent. I hope you'll make him yours as well. Brain13 says, so Vanderbilt is almost certainly going to be 0-3. We knew this could happen on paper, but we can beat just about any other team we face the rest of the season, although he says maybe not at Florida. How do you keep a team motivated and not give up after that rough start? How do you keep the fans motivated? I think the second one may be the bigger question, because Derek has recovered from some pretty bad starts and bad mid-seasons before. I mean, give credit to Derek. I think that may be his one strength, is turning around things where at times it looks like the wheels are about to fall off. But the fans right now, I think, are the issue that, I don't know, it just hasn't seemed to really matter what he's done. They can't seem to keep interest for long.
Well, I don't want to be blunt at the fans or anything, but if you're Derek Mason, you can't have one without the other. You have to make sure that you keep your team together and you keep grinding away and improving, because if you unravel, then obviously you're going to lose the fans, right? If that takes care of itself. He can't control if he gets this team going in the right direction and they start playing well and the fans don't respond. That's on the fans. That's not on him. So I would hope that the fans can be patient. I think most fans understand that these first 3 games are going to be extremely tough games, extremely tough. So I don't know that they are over par. Or if you want to use a tennis reference, there's no service breaks, right? The Purdue game was one where I think you're disappointed that they didn't have a chance to win, that they weren't right there in the fourth quarter, but that was not one that you chalked up as a win going into the season. So there's still plenty of time to have a good season. The schedule is the schedule. They had Georgia, Purdue at Purdue, and LSU out of the gate. That they didn't make that schedule. So there's still a lot of time to define this season. And so I'm not worried at all about what's going on in the inner workings. In fact, I still believe there's a lot of room for improvement. As I've been saying before, they flashed. Like Riley Neal threw some passes where I'm saying, okay, that's an SEC arm right there. That's a big time throw. He's just got to be able to do it more often. They've got to protect him better, and they've got to get better cohesion and put the pieces together. They've got weapons. I don't think there's any question about it. I think if they can get it all together, I can see them, if the offensive line play just improves a little bit, I can see them having games where they score 30, 35 points on some SEC weekends. And they're going to have to, I think.
Last question. This is a baseball one. VU Titan says, I know that Tim Corbin has too much class to do this, but you wish he would tell these people who say Vanderbilt has an unfair advantage just to shut up.
I think if you look at every school right now, and I just read where, the recruiting class for next year for Vanderbilt is number 1 or number 2. It's going to be right there again. Every single school, number 1, is trying to figure out how do we beat Vanderbilt now, and that's an unbelievable feeling to have. I think and it's an unfamiliar feeling to the outsiders, right? They can't figure out how do we beat Vanderbilt. I mean, think about how crazy that sounds, but that's what's happening. And so they're looking into how are they doing it, and they're coming up with this or that. I would say that every school, especially in the SEC, that has a lot of resources and is in position to win, they have advantages that other schools don't have, right? And they are trying to find as many advantages as they can within the rules. So I wouldn't put what happens at Vanderbilt any differently at all. The higher you go, the more you win, the more you're going to get scrutinized. So I think this is part of it. There's really no reason for Tim Corbin to have to address anything.
It is really weird. You grow up in this area, and Vanderbilt is almost like a plague. It's just like a continual punchline, except for the spots of success in basketball. And now to see them be like the SEC villain is something is sort of comical.
Oh, yeah. Well, because it's the same. Here's the thing, Chris. You've heard as well as I have over the years. There will be plenty of people that will call our show and have over the years, right, or in a forum with you and say, why is Vanderbilt even in the league? They don't care about winning. They should be kicked out of the SEC. If they can't really commit to winning anymore, then why are they even in the league? And those same people are going to get on Vanderbilt baseball for having, quote, an unfair advantage. Now, that doesn't work. It's either one or the other. So all of a sudden, you've got a school that you want to kick out of the league because they're not committed to winning. You have a team that wins a national championship, and you say it's unfair. That doesn't fly.
Well, the thing that cracks me up is some of the same people that make those observations. Look, we all know how stuff gets done in recruiting at certain levels. There are networks of people who make things happen, let's just say. And it is kind of comical to see fans of teams who probably benefit from that in other sports cry about Vanderbilt's baseball, which you can talk about. Maybe that's not fair within the context of the Spear of the Game rules. That's one discussion, but it is legal, and that's always the thing that cracks me up.
Well, here's the other thing, too. Vanderbilt is the place that a lot of these premier college baseball players want to go. And so when you have that, that's just when you have momentum like that, it's really difficult, I think, for other schools to comprehend that, especially when they see that Vanderbilt hasn't been that school. Now, hopefully they can get that way. I would like to see the same kind of dynamic start happening in basketball, and hopefully that will happen here in the next few years, where people are like saying, that's a place I want to be. I would love to see football take another step forward, and have a couple premier recruits that say, Nashville is a happening city. It's a premier university in the toughest league, and I want to go make Vanderbilt a winner. That's the next goal, is to even upgrade it. And Vanderbilt baseball has gotten to that, right? And so people just can't grasp that. But that's really what's happening. And when that happens, you're going to have some people howling for one reason or another.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's why they win. They're the place that all the cool kids want to be in terms of baseball. I mean, you can say scholarships and things. Does that have an advantage? Sure. But the culture that he's created is why they win.
No question about it. And I think you said it too. You're doing it without breaking the rules, right? All you're doing is taking advantage of what's out there. And the bottom line is you're churning out good people. They're going to class at Vanderbilt. They're not trying to sneak people through. Like we know the stories that have happened in other sports and other areas of the country where there's diabolical things going on. And so that to me is a totally different category than saying, okay, what do I have at my disposal at my university that I can help create an opportunity for as many good players as I can get under my roof to come in. And by the way, I got a lot of good players that want to come here. That's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think also, and I think this kind of goes to all sports. I mean, yeah, football has had a tough couple of weeks, but it's a lot better than it used to be. I just think conditions around Vanderbilt have changed to help them in athletic success. The SEC's visibility, that's, I think, one of those that raises the tide, raises all the boats, so to speak. I think that's one thing. I think another thing is you've got the Me Too era, where, I mean, that's just a thing where you can't get away with some of the things that people used to just bury and do. You can't let athletes run rampant anymore with regards to those kind of things. The APR has leveled the field in terms of academics. I think that there are some factors in play that just really outside of Vanderbilt's control across the board, I think have leveled the playing field for them some.
Well, I think every university's got to decide, what is the right thing for them? Who are the right students that fit your profile? I think Vanderbilt as a university as a whole, and I think this is part of the answer, has done tremendous things to become so attractive to so many different people. The diversity, it's evolved since I've been in school, and I think it's a fantastic thing. And I think all the coaches and all the sports are challenged and are trying to find where do they fit in all of this. How do I take advantage of some of the things going on within the university? That's part of the game, and finding the right people, because you want to. At the bottom line is any Vanderbilt fan should want this, right? You want to win, but you're not winning at all costs. You're trying to win with people that belong at Vanderbilt, that are thriving at Vanderbilt, and are going to churn out and come out of their experience at Vanderbilt doing really good things wherever they decide to do them, whether it's in Nashville or somewhere else. You want to churn out good people, and you want to win too.
Willie, that was a lot of fun today. I know you've got to go probably to get ready for your show. I'll give you the floor for any final thoughts that maybe we didn't get to regarding Vanderbilt, and also to promote your shows, your Twitter account, and anything else like that.
Well, I'm at Willie D1025 on Twitter. I really enjoy following yourself and all the people that cover the Vanderbilt stuff. Of course, I'm on 1025 The Game FM, ESPN Radio Nashville, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's called Darren, Donick, and Chase with Darren McFarland, Chase McCabe. And we're the flagship for the Predators, and I'll be doing the TV again on Fox Sports Tennessee Predators training camp cranks up later this week, and so we're on a countdown to October 3rd for the opener. So plenty going on. It's a great time of the year.
Thanks so much, Willie.
All right, Chris, talk to you again soon.
He's Willie Daunick of 102.5 The Game. I'm Chris Lee, the host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll have more coming later in the week.